Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was transported to the new world instead of Ainz and Albedo fell in love with him? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Shinobi Overlord Chapter 1. The 7th Hokage in another world. The ticking of the clock echoed through the Hokage's office, a steady rhythm that had long since faded into background noise for Naruto Uzumaki. Moonlight spilled through the windows, casting long shadows across stacks of paperwork that seemed to multiply faster than his shadow clones could process them. Naruto leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. Just a few more reports, he muttered to himself. At 35, the 7th Hokage still possessed the same boundless energy that had defined him as a genin, though the responsibilities of leadership had tempered his once impulsive nature. His blonde hair was cut shorter these days, and faint lines had begun to appear at the corners of his eyes, evidence of both laughter and stress. The village was peaceful tonight. Through his window, he could see the lights of Konoha stretching out below the Hokage monument, a testament to the peace he and his generation had fought so hard to achieve. Lord 7th, came a voice from the doorway. Shikamaru Nara stood there, looking even more exhausted than Naruto felt. You should go home. Hinata called twice already. Naruto sighed, guilt tugging at him. I know. Just finishing up the border patrol reports. Go ahead without me. Shikamaru hesitated but nodded. Don't stay too late. We have the 5-cage conference call at dawn. Yeah. Naruto waved dismissively, already turning back to the documents before him. After Shikamaru's footsteps faded down the hallway, Naruto created 3 shadow clones to help with the remaining paperwork. Let's get this done so I can go home, he told his duplicates. The clones nodded in unison and set to work. As the original Naruto signed a trade agreement with the Land of Earth, he noticed something strange. The ink from his pen seemed to be flowing upward, defying gravity. He blinked, wondering if exhaustion was causing him to hallucinate. Hey, are you guys seeing this? He asked his clones. They looked up, equally confused. The room had taken on a faint green glow, and particles of light were gathering around Naruto's desk. Boss, one clone said cautiously, I think we should. Before he could finish, the light intensified to blinding levels. Naruto felt a sensation like being pulled in all directions at once. The familiar weight of the Hokage's office vanished, replaced by a disorienting feeling of freefall. What the hell? He shouted, instinctively trying to gather chakra to stabilize himself. But it was like trying to grab smoke. The energy slipped through his mental grasp. For what seemed like an eternity, Naruto tumbled through nothingness. Then, with jarring suddenness, solid ground materialized beneath him. The world stopped spinning. Naruto found himself sitting on something hard and smooth. His vision cleared slowly, revealing an enormous, ornate chamber. He was perched on what could only be described as a throne, a massive construction of dark stone and precious metals. Far more imposing than the simple chair in the Hokage's office. What is this? Where am I? He muttered, standing quickly and scanning the room. His ninja instincts kicked into high alert. The chamber was cavernous, supported by towering columns of black marble. Banners bearing unfamiliar symbols hung from the walls, and the floor was polished to a mirror shine. Everything exuded an aura of power and ancient majesty, qualities entirely foreign to the functional architecture of Konoha. Movement caught his eye. Near the far end of the chamber, figures were kneeling. Naruto counted 7 of them, each radiating a presence that made his skin prickle. Despite his decades of experience facing S-rank threats, something about these beings set off alarm bells in his mind. Lord Momonga, spoke one of the figures, a woman with raven black hair and alabaster skin. We, the floor guardians of the great tomb of Nazarick, pledge our eternal loyalty to you, the last of the supreme beings. Naruto blinked. I think there's been some kind of mistake. My name's Naruto Uzumaki, 7th Hokage of Konohagakure. A ripple of confusion passed through the kneeling figures. The woman who had spoken raised her head slightly, revealing golden eyes with slit pupils that widened in apparent shock. My lord, she questioned, her voice uncertain for the first time. Another of the kneeling figures, a tall, slender man with pointed ears and a metallic tail, spoke up. Lord Momonga, Is this some sort of test for us? A new form you have chosen to take? Look, I don't know who this Momonga is, Naruto said firmly, stepping away from the throne. He absently noted that he was still in his Hokage robes. But I'm not him. Something brought me here, and I need to figure out what's going on and how to get back home. The kneeling figures exchanged glances. Then, the woman with golden eyes rose gracefully to her feet. Naruto noticed black wings folded behind her back, and atop her head sat small horns that curved elegantly against her hair. She was breathtakingly beautiful, but in a way that seemed almost inhuman. Forgive us, my lord, she said, bowing deeply. I am Albedo, guardian overseer of Nazarick. If you say you are Naruto Uzumaki, then that is who you are. Our loyalty is absolute, regardless of your name or form. Naruto frowned. That's not really addressing the problem. I'm not supposed to be here, and you're clearly waiting for someone else. The tall man with the metal tail also rose, adjusting spectacles that glinted in the chamber's light. Interesting. Perhaps there has been some cosmic substitution at the moment of the world's changing. I am Demiurge, guardian of the 7th floor. May I suggest we verify your identity and powers, if only to better serve you? That's reasonable, Naruto agreed, relieved that at least someone was acknowledging the situation. But first, can someone explain where exactly here is? You mentioned the Great Tomb of Nazarick. Albedo stepped forward. Yes, my lord. The Great Tomb of Nazarick is the glorious domain created by the 41 Supreme Beings, of which Lord Momonga, she hesitated, then corrected herself. Of which your predecessor was the last to remain. We are its guardians, created to serve and protect. Naruto processed this information, trying to fit it into any framework he understood. So this is some kind of alternate dimension, different from the Pure Land or the Summoning Realms. I believe, Demiurge interjected smoothly, that we may have been transported from Yggdrasil to a new world entirely. The timing coincides with the foretold end of Yggdrasil. The other figures had risen now, and Naruto took stock of them. A petite girl with mismatched eyes and a gothic dress. A towering insectoid creature that clicked its mandibles thoughtfully. A dark elf with pointed ears and heterochromatic eyes. A blue-skinned humanoid with an icy aura, and a massive hamster-like beast standing on its hind legs. I'm going to need more explanation than that, Naruto said, but first things first. I need to check something. Without warning, Naruto formed the familiar cross seal with his hands. Shadow Clone Jutsu. The result shocked even him. Instead of the 1 or 2 clones he'd intended to create, 20 perfect duplicates of Naruto popped into existence around the chamber. Moreover, he barely felt the chakra drain, as if his reserves had somehow expanded exponentially. The guardians reacted with varying degrees of surprise and admiration. The dark elf actually clapped her hands in delight. Impressive, my lord, Albedo exclaimed. Such power to create perfect duplicates without apparent effort. Naruto dispelled the clones with a thought, feeling the rush of returned chakra. Something was definitely different about how his powers worked here. He could sense his chakra flowing more freely, responding to his will with unprecedented ease. Okay, he said, mind racing. I need to understand this situation. Let's start with the basics. You all serve this place, Nazarick, and you thought I was someone named Momonga. Now that I'm here instead, what exactly do you expect from me? Albedo stepped forward, a beatific smile on her face. We expect only to serve you, my lord. As the ruler of Nazarick, your word is absolute law. We exist to fulfill your every desire and command. There was something in her tone on those last words that made Naruto slightly uncomfortable, but he pressed on. And outside these walls, what world are we in? Demiurge adjusted his glasses. That, my lord, is something we ourselves must discover. If the theory is correct and we have been transported to a new world, then exploration would be prudent. Naruto nodded. This was starting to make a bizarre kind of sense. Whatever had happened, he was now in charge of this strange place with these powerful guardians looking to him for leadership. It wasn't so different from becoming Hokage. Really. Just with more gothic architecture and apparently non-human subordinates. All right, he said decisively. Here's what we're going to do. I need a complete briefing on Nazarick's defenses and capabilities. Then we need reconnaissance of the surrounding area. I want to know what kind of world we're dealing with, who the major powers are, and what threats might exist. The guardians seemed pleased by these orders. Demiurge smiled approvingly. An excellent strategy, my lord. Cautious yet proactive. Sebas, Albedo addressed the distinguished-looking man who had remained silent thus far. You will lead a reconnaissance team to survey our immediate surroundings. It shall be done, Sebas replied with a perfect bow. My lord, Albedo continued, turning back to Naruto, Perhaps you would like to inspect the throne room properly. And afterward, I could show you to your chambers. Her golden eyes held a promise that made Naruto clear his throat awkwardly. The inspection sounds good, he said quickly. I need to understand everything about this place if I'm going to lead it effectively. As the other guardians dispersed to carry out their assignments, Albedo led Naruto around the vast chamber, explaining various features. The more Naruto learned, the more overwhelming the situation became. Nazarick was apparently a massive underground tomb with 9 floors, guarded by powerful beings like the ones he'd just met. It housed countless treasures, armies of undead, and magical defenses beyond anything in the ninja world. And this staff of Ainz and Albedo, Albedo said, gesturing to an elaborate staff floating beside the throne, is the symbol of the guild's authority. It contains the power of all 41 supreme beings. Naruto approached it cautiously. May I? Of course, my lord. It belongs to you now. He reached out and grasped the staff. Immediately, he felt a surge of power unlike anything he'd experienced before, different from chakra or even the Nine Tails energy. The orbs embedded in the staff pulsed with light, responding to his touch. Whoa, he whispered, feeling the raw potential in his hands. This was a weapon of immense power, possibly on par with the legendary ninja tools created by the Sage of Six Paths. It suits you, my lord, Albedo said, her voice soft and admiring. Naruto carefully placed the staff back in its floating position. I think I'll hold off on using this until I understand its capabilities better. They continued the tour, eventually exiting the throne room and proceeding through ornate hallways lined with undead guards who bowed as they passed. Naruto took mental notes of everything, mapping the layout in his mind as any good ninja would. Albedo, he said as they walked, you mentioned being created to serve. What exactly did you mean by that? The guardian overseer smiled. The supreme beings created us, my lord. They shaped our forms and wrote our very natures. We are NPCs. She paused, looking confused for a moment, that is. We were given life by our creators to serve specific functions within Nazarick. So you're saying you're not born naturally. You were made by these supreme beings. Yes, my lord. Does that displease you? A note of worry entered her voice. No, not at all, Naruto said hastily. It's just different from what I'm used to. In my world, even summoned creatures have their own societies and lives. I see, Albedo replied. Rest assured, we exist to serve, and in doing so, we find our purpose and happiness. She hesitated before adding, particularly in my case, as I was programmed to be deeply in love with you. Naruto nearly tripped over his own feet. You were what? Albedo's cheeks flushed slightly. It is true, my lord. Lord Momonga modified my settings before the transition. My love for you is absolute and unchangeable. It is the core of my being. Naruto ran a hand through his hair, thoroughly uncomfortable. I don't know how to respond to that, Albedo. Where I come from, love isn't something you program into someone. Does my devotion displease you? She asked, a hint of fear in her voice. No, it's not that, Naruto said carefully. I'm just not sure it's fair to you. Real feelings should develop naturally, not be written into someone's settings. Albedo looked genuinely puzzled. But my feelings are real, my lord. I experience them truly. Does their origin matter if the emotion itself is genuine? That philosophical question gave Naruto pause. It reminded him of conversations he'd had with the Nine Tails over years about the nature of free will and predetermined paths. I guess we'll have to figure that out as we go, he finally said. For now, let's focus on understanding our situation. They had reached what appeared to be Naruto's private quarters, an opulent suite that made the Hokage mansion look modest in comparison. Albedo showed him around, explaining various magical amenities that Naruto could barely comprehend. These are the mirror of remote viewing controls, she said, gesturing to an ornate console near a large mirror. With this, you can observe anywhere within Nazarick, and with practice, areas beyond our walls as well. That could be useful, Naruto said, examining the device with interest. Back home, he would have needed specialized sensory ninja or surveillance seals to achieve similar results. A knock at the door interrupted them. Sebas entered after Albedo's acknowledgement, bowing deeply. "My lord, I have completed an initial reconnaissance of our immediate surroundings," he reported. "We appear to be located in a remote wetland area. There are no major settlements visible from our position, though I detected smoke from what may be a village approximately 5 miles to the southeast." Naruto nodded. "Good work. Any signs of immediate threat?" "None, my lord. The local wildlife seems ordinary, though I noted some creatures that do not match any known species from Yggdrasil. I believe this confirms we are indeed in a new world. Prepare a more detailed exploration team," Naruto ordered. "I want to know more about that village, but without being detected for now. Information gathering only." "It shall be done," Sebas replied with another bow before departing. Alone again with Albedo, Naruto turned his attention to the mirror of remote viewing. "Can you show me how this works? I'd like to see this village for myself." Albedo guided him through the controls, and after some trial and error, the mirror's surface rippled and revealed an image of a small settlement. The architecture was medieval in style, simple wooden buildings with thatched roofs, surrounded by farmland. People moved about their daily tasks, looking entirely human from what Naruto could tell. "They seem peaceful enough," he observed. "Just ordinary villagers." As he continued watching, however, the scene changed. Riders appeared on the horizon, approaching the village at speed. The Y wore armor that gleamed in the sunlight, carrying banners with an unfamiliar crest. "Are those soldiers?" Naruto asked, leaning closer to the mirror. Albedo studied the image. "They appear to be knights of some kind. Their equipment suggests a level of organization and resources beyond that of simple bandits." The villagers had noticed the approaching horsemen and were reacting with alarm, some running into houses while others gathered children and fled toward the forest. "They're afraid," Naruto said grimly. "This isn't a friendly visit." He watched as the knights reached the village and began systematically setting fire to the outer buildings. Villagers who resisted were cut down without hesitation. "This is wrong," Naruto said, his hands tightening into fists. "We need to stop this." Albedo looked surprised. "My lord wishes to intervene in human affairs. May I ask why?" "Because innocent people are being slaughtered," Naruto replied, already moving toward the door. "And because I need to understand this world better. This is as good a starting point as any." "But my lord," Albedo said, following him, "they are merely humans. Far beneath your concern." Naruto stopped, turning to face her. "In my world, I was Hokage, the leader of my village. My duty was to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. I'm not going to abandon that principle just because I'm in a different world now." Seeing the determination in his eyes, Albedo bowed her head. "I understand. How would you like to proceed? Get me Demiurge and whoever else can move quickly. We're going to that village." Within minutes, Naruto had assembled a small team. Himself, Albedo, Demiurge, and a creature named Mare, the shy dark elf he'd seen in the throne room. According to Albedo, Mare's druidic magic made him valuable for reconnaissance and environmental manipulation. The fastest way would be teleportation magic, Demiurge suggested. "Although as we are unfamiliar with the area, there is a small risk." "No need," Naruto said. "I can get us there another way." He formed the familiar hand signs for his Flying Thunder God technique, planning to mark one of them and bring the others along, only to discover that the jutsu wasn't working quite as expected. "Interesting," he muttered, feeling the chakra respond differently. "Let me try something else." Naruto concentrated, forming a different seal. Suddenly, a massive toad, nearly the size of a small house, appeared beneath them with a puff of smoke. "Whoa," Naruto exclaimed, startled by the success of the summoning and the size of the toad. It was NT Gamabunta or any of his regular summons, but a completely new toad he'd never seen before. The guardians seemed equally surprised, though they quickly masked it. "Yo," the toad greeted in a deep voice. "Who summoned me? And where the hell are we?" "I'm Naruto Uzumaki," Naruto replied, patting the toad's massive head. And I'm as confused about the where as you are. Can you help us get to AV? Village about 5 miles southeast of here. There are people in trouble. The toad seemed to consider this, then nodded. Hop on, then. Name's Gamaryu, by the way. Never heard of you before, but you've got the chakra of a proper sage. So I'll help out. As they climbed onto the toad's back, Demiurge looked intrigued. You have contracted with such beings before, my lord. Something like that, Naruto replied, helping Mare up. Though the toads I knew were from Mount Myoboku. I'm not sure where this one comes from. Gamaryu leapt forward with surprising speed, clearing the wetland in enormous bounds. Naruto braced himself against the familiar sensation, memories of countless missions with toad summons flooding back. The Guardians adapted quickly, with Albedo and Demiurge maintaining perfect balance while Mare clung to his staff nervously. As they approached the village, the scene came into clearer view. At least 20 armored knights were systematically working through the settlement, setting buildings ablaze and rounding up villagers in the central square. Bodies already littered the ground. Stop at the edge of the forest, Naruto instructed Gamaryu. I want to assess the situation before we move in. The massive toad complied, landing with surprising stealth behind the treeline. Naruto and his team dismounted, observing the village from cover. Those banners bear the crest of the Baharuth Empire, Demiurge noted, his keen eyes picking out details. If my knowledge remains accurate in this world, they are a significant human nation known for military might. Why are they attacking a simple village? Naruto wondered aloud. Conscription, perhaps, Demiurge suggested. Or a punitive expedition for failure to pay taxes. Human nations often exercise such brutality against their own kind. Naruto's eyes hardened as he watched a knight drag a screaming woman from her home. Whatever the reason, it stops now. Here's the plan. I'll create a distraction and engage their main force. Albedo, you protect the villagers already in the square. Mare, can you help put out those fires? The dark elf nodded timidly. Why yes, Lord Naruto. I can control earth and water to smother the flames. Perfect. Demiurge, secure the perimeter and make sure no knights escape. I want prisoners, not corpses. We need information. The Guardians exchanged glances, clearly unused to such merciful tactics, but nodded in agreement. Remember, Naruto added, our goal is to save these people and learn about this world. We're not here to conquer or terrorize. With their roles established, Naruto formed his signature hand sign, Shadow Clone Jutsu. This time, he created 50 perfect duplicates, each with a substantial portion of chakra. The clones spread out, surrounding the village from all sides. Begin, Naruto commanded, and the operation launched. The clones burst from the forest simultaneously, creating instant chaos among the knights. Naruto himself leapt high into the air, wanting to make his presence unmistakable. That's enough, he shouted, his voice carrying across the village. Stand down and surrender. The knights looked up in confusion, their discipline momentarily forgotten at the sight of identical yellow-haired men in strange robes descending on them from all directions. Their commander, a heavily armored figure on horseback, raised his sword. Empire soldiers, form up. Defend yourselves against this sorcery. Naruto landed directly in front of the commander, his eyes steady. Last chance. Order your men to lay down their weapons. The commander's Ainz and Albedo was a vicious sword swing toward Naruto's head. Naruto easily sidestepped the attack and delivered a chakra-enhanced palm strike to the knight's breastplate. The armor crumpled inward as the knight flew backward off his horse, landing in an unconscious heap 20 feet away. Around the village, Naruto's clones engaged the knights with similar efficiency, disarming and disabling rather than killing. These warriors might be terrorizing civilians, but Naruto's years as Hokage had taught him the value of restraint and information gathering. Albedo moved like a dark whirlwind through the village square, her halberd deflecting knights' blades with contemptuous ease. She positioned herself between the gathered villagers and their attackers, a beautiful yet terrifying guardian. Stay behind me, she instructed the villagers, who stared at her with a mixture of fear and hope. Mare, meanwhile, had begun extinguishing fires. With shy, hesitant gestures, he raised his staff, causing the earth to rise up and smother flames. Where water was needed, he drew moisture from the air or pulled it from the ground, demonstrating an elemental control that impressed even Naruto. Demiurge had taken a more subtle approach, using illusion magic to confuse knights attempting to flee and herding them back into the village. His metallic tail lashed out occasionally, precise strikes that rendered opponents unconscious. Within minutes, the battle, if it could even be called that, was over. The knights were subdued, their weapons collected in a pile in the village square. Naruto's clones stood guard over the prisoners while villagers cautiously emerged from hiding. The real Naruto approached the gathered civilians, conscious of the fear in their eyes. "You're safe now," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "We're not here to harm you." An elderly man, leaning heavily on a walking stick, stepped forward. "Who are you? Are you a magic caster?" "Something like that," Naruto replied with a smile. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. These are my—" He hesitated, then continued, "my companions. We saw what was happening and came to help." "The gods must have sent you," the old man said, tears in his eyes. "The empire has been demanding higher taxes, but when our harvest failed, we couldn't pay. They came to make an example of us." Naruto's expression darkened. "That's no reason to burn homes and kill innocent people. Such is the way of the world, young man," the elder replied wearily. "Well, maybe that needs to change," Naruto said. He turned to Albedo. "Can we provide any assistance for the wounded?" Albedo looked momentarily surprised by the request but nodded. "Mare possesses healing magic that could help the seriously injured. And we could provide some supplies from Nazarick." "Good. Make it happen," Naruto ordered. He then addressed the village elder again. "We'll help you rebuild and tend to your wounded. But I also need information about this world. Maps, politics, common knowledge. Can you help with that?" The elder nodded eagerly. "Of course. Anything for our saviors. My grandson was a student before returning to care for me. He has books and maps you might find useful." As villagers began to organize themselves, tending to the wounded and assessing damage, Naruto approached the captured knights. Their commander had regained consciousness and glared up at him with a mixture of fear and defiance. "Who are you to interfere with imperial business?" the man demanded, though his voice shook slightly. Naruto crouched to meet the knight's gaze. "Someone who doesn't like seeing innocent people slaughtered. Now, you have two choices. Answer my questions honestly, or spend some quality time with my friend over there." He gestured toward Demiurge, who smiled pleasantly, an expression somehow more terrifying than any scowl. The commander swallowed hard. "What do you want to know?" "Everything about the Baharuth Empire. Its structure, its leaders, its military strength. And then I want to know about the other nations in this region." Over the next hour, Naruto extracted valuable information from the knights while his clones helped the villagers begin repairs. He learned about Emperor Jurchnev, known as the Bloody Emperor, for his ruthless purges, about the neighboring Riesti's kingdom and their ongoing annual conflicts with the empire, about the slain theocracy to the south with its religious zealotry, and about the Council State, a nation of demi-humans that most humans regarded with suspicion. "This world's pretty divided," Naruto remarked to Demiurge as they stepped away from the prisoners. "Humans fighting humans, species distrusting each other. Reminds me of the ninja world before the Fourth War." "And how did that change, my lord?" Demiurge inquired. "Through understanding. Through pain and shared struggle. Eventually, people realized we had more in common than not," Naruto replied, his thoughts drifting to hard-won lessons of his past. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion at the village edge. Mare came running toward them, his heterochromatic eyes wide with alarm. Lord Naruto, someone's coming. Powerful beings approaching from the south." Naruto's senses immediately sharpened. He could feel it now. Multiple chakra signatures, or something similar, moving with purpose toward the village. These weren't ordinary soldiers. The energy they radiated reminded him more of highly trained shinobi. "How many?" he asked Mare. "6, I think," the dark elf replied nervously. "They're trying to conceal their presence, but I felt their magic." Naruto turned to Demiurge. "Get the villagers to safety. Albedo, with me. We'll meet these newcomers away from the settlement." Leaving several clones to assist Demiurge, Naruto and Albedo moved to the southern edge of the village, positioning themselves in an open field where they would have room to maneuver if necessary. They didn't have to wait long. 6 figures emerged from the tree line. moving with the coordinated precision of an elite unit. They wore distinctive armor of varying designs, each carrying weapons that hummed with power even at a distance. At their head strode a woman in gleaming plate mail, her blonde hair cropped short, eyes sharp and assessing. "That's close enough," Naruto called out when they were 30 paces away. The group halted, and the leader stepped forward. "I am Captain Bellius of the slain theocracy's Black Scripture," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the field. "We detected an unusual magical disturbance in this area. Identify yourself, stranger." Naruto stepped forward to match her. "Naruto Uzumaki. We intervened when Empire Knights were massacring this village. What's your interest here?" The captain's eyes narrowed as she studied him. "Our interest is in maintaining the balance of power and protecting humanity. The surge of unknown energy we detected could represent a threat." "The only threat here was to innocent villagers," Naruto replied evenly. "And we've neutralized that." The Black Scripture members exchanged glances. One of them, a man with a staff topped with a serpent design, leaned toward the captain and whispered something. She nodded fractionally. "Our diviners sensed no ordinary magic," she said to Naruto. "What you wield is something different. In the name of the 6 great gods, I must ask you to accompany us to the theocracy for questioning." Naruto smiled, but there was no humor in it. "I'm going to decline that invitation. I have my own priorities right now, and they involve helping these people. Not playing politics with your theocracy." The tension in the air thickened. Behind the captain, the other scripture members subtly shifted into combat stances. "I don't think you understand," Captain Bellius said. "This isn't a request. Unknown powers must be investigated and, if necessary, contained. It's for the protection of all humanity." Albedo stepped forward, her golden eyes flashing dangerously. "You dare to threaten the Supreme Being. Your arrogance exceeds your wisdom, human." The scripture members reacted to Albedo's non-human features, hands moving to weapons. The man with the serpent staff raised it slightly, its head beginning to glow. "Stand down," Naruto said firmly, though it wasn't clear if he was addressing Albedo or the scripture. "There's no need for this to turn violent." "Then come willingly," the captain replied. Naruto sighed. "That's not going to happen." He formed a hand sign, and 20 shadow clones popped into existence surrounding the scripture members. "But I'm willing to talk as equals, not as prisoner and captors." The scripture reacted instantly, dropping into a perfect defensive formation. The magic caster with the serpent staff chanted something, and a barrier of light formed around their group, dissipating 3 clones that tried to breach it. "Containment formation," the captain ordered. "Target as high-level threat." What follow? Wed was a display of coordinated power that would have impressed even the Anbu Black Ops. Each scripture member executed specific techniques with practiced precision, creating a layered attack designed to immobilize rather than kill. Naruto, however, had faced far worse in his time. He moved like liquid lightning, evading spell effects and weapon strikes while his clones engaged individual scripture members. He wasn't trying to harm them, merely to demonstrate the futility of their attack. Albedo proved even more formidable. When 2 scripture warriors managed to bypass Naruto's clones and charge her directly, she met them with her halberd, moving faster than human eyes could track. Their weapons sparked against hers, and with 2 precise movements, both warriors found themselves disarmed and thrown back. "Enough," Naruto called out after a minute of this demonstration. To emphasize his point, he gathered chakra into his palm, forming a swirling sphere of energy, a basic Rasengan. "This isn't even a fraction of what I could do if I wanted to hurt you. Stand down, and let's talk reasonably." The Black Scripture members hesitated, looking to their captain. For the first time, uncertain. Tai showed in her expression as she assessed the situation. Her team, among the strongest humans in this world, had barely managed to touch either Naruto or Albedo. "Lower your weapons," she finally commanded her team. "But maintain defensive posture." As the scripture relaxed slightly, Naruto dispelled his Rasengan and most of his clones, leaving only 4 positioned strategically around the area. "Thank you," he said. "Now, I understand your concern about unknown powers. In your position, I'd probably do the same. But threatening and attempting to capture me isn't the way to get answers." The captain studied him for a long moment before responding. "What are you? No human magic works as yours does." "I'm human," Naruto assured her, just not from this world. I was brought here through circumstances I don't yet understand. I'm still figuring things out myself. This revelation clearly disturbed the scripture members. The magic caster with the serpent staff spoke up for the first time. An otherworlder. The prophecies speak of such beings as harbingers of calamity. Naruto shook his head. I'm not here to bring calamity. Where I come from, I was a leader committed to peace. I don't plan to change that philosophy just because I'm in a different world now. Pretty words, the captain replied skeptically. Yet you command a creature clearly not human. She gestured toward Albedo, whose wings and horns were undisguisable. Albedo and the others who serve me are people, regardless of their appearance, Naruto said firmly. Judge us by our actions, not our origins. We just saved a village your theocracy was apparently content to let the empire destroy. This barb struck home. Several scripture members looked uncomfortable. Our mission is to protect humanity as a whole, the captain said defensively. We cannot intervene in every border skirmish or tax collection. Then we have different definitions of protection, Naruto replied. But that doesn't make us enemies. I propose this. Return to your theocracy. Tell your leaders what you've seen. If they want to speak with me as equals, I'm willing to meet. But come at me as enemies again, and you won't get the same restraint I've shown today. The captain considered this ultimatum, clearly weighing options and probabilities. Finally, she nodded curtly. I will convey your message. But know this, Naruto Uzumaki, the Lane theocracy has existed for 600 years protecting humanity. We will do whatever is necessary to continue that mission. Fair enough, Naruto said. So will I. With obvious reluctance, the black scripture began to withdraw, maintaining formation and keeping their eyes on Naruto and Albedo until they disappeared back into the forest. They will return with greater numbers and preparation, my lord. Albedo observed once they were gone. Their type always does. Probably, Naruto agreed. But we've bought time and established that we're not to be trifled with. That's enough for now. They returned to the village, where Demiurge had efficiently organized both the captive knights and the rebuilding efforts. Mare was using his magic to repair structural damage to homes while villagers looked on in amazement. The situation is well in hand, my lord, Demiurge reported. The villagers have provided basic maps and information about the surrounding regions. Most illuminating. Good work, Naruto said, genuinely impressed by their efficiency. What about the knights? Secured and awaiting your judgment. They are remarkably forthcoming now that they understand their position. Naruto considered the options. We'll release them, minus their weapons and armor. They can report to their emperor what happened here. I want him to know that someone is watching and won't tolerate attacks on innocent villagers. Demiurge's expression revealed nothing, but Naruto sensed his surprise at this merciful decision. As you wish, my lord. Shall I prepare a message for the emperor? Yes. Diplomatic but firm. Make it clear that we have no quarrel with the empire as long as they respect basic decency. As Demiurge departed to draft this message, Naruto found himself approached by the village elder and several other residents. They knelt before him, heads bowed. Please, don't do that, Naruto said, uncomfortable with the display. Standing is fine. The elder rose shakily. Lord Uzumaki, we cannot express our gratitude enough. You saved us when no one else would. Our village is yours to command. I don't want to command your village, Naruto replied gently. I just want you to be safe and to live in peace. Can you rebuild here? The elder nodded. With the help your people have already provided, yes. But what if the empire returns? It was a valid concern. Naruto thought for a moment, then reached into a pocket of his robes, finding to his surprise that he still had some of his special kunai, the three-prong throwing knives inscribed with the Flying Thunder God formula. Take this, he said, handing one to the elder. If you're threatened again, channel any kind of energy, magical or physical, into it. I'll know, and I'll come. The elder accepted the strange knife with reverent hands. A magical beacon. You honor us, Lord Uzumaki. It's the least I can do, Naruto said. Now, is there anything else you need before we go? The villagers provided a list of basic necessities, which Naruto arranged to have delivered from Nazarik's apparently vast stores. By the time the sun began to set, the village was stable, homes temporarily repaired, wounded treated, and Defenses organized against any potential return of Empire forces. As Naruto prepared to depart with his guardians, the elder's grandson approached, carrying a stack of books and rolled parchments. Maps and histories, Lord. The young man said, offering them. Everything I have on the surrounding nations and known world. It isn't much, but it's perfect, Naruto interrupted, accepting the materials gratefully. This will help us tremendously. Thank you. With final farewells exchanged, Naruto and his guardians departed on Gamaryu's back, leaving the grateful village behind. As they bounded across the wetlands toward Nazarick, Naruto reflected on the day's events. We learned a lot, he said to his companions. This world has its own power structures, conflicts, and prejudices, not so different from mine in some ways. And yet you approach it differently than Lord Momonga might have, Demiurge observed carefully. Your intervention on behalf of humans is unexpected. Naruto considered this. I became Hokage to protect people. All people. I'm not going to abandon that principle just because I'm in a new world with new rules. Nazarick might have been created as a tomb of monsters in this game you've mentioned. But now it's real, and so are all of you. We have a chance to define ourselves however we choose. Albedo studied him with those golden eyes, something unreadable in her expression. You speak of protection rather than conquest. This is truly your nature. It is, Naruto confirmed. I've seen where the path of conquest and hatred leads. I'm more interested in building bridges than burning them. As they continued toward Nazarick, none of them noticed the faint shimmer in the evening sky, a momentary distortion like heat haze, high above the wetlands. Within that shimmer, something ancient stirred, consciousness rousing after centuries of dormancy. A foreign power had entered this world. Something that did not belong. Something that disrupted the carefully maintained balance. The entity's awareness expanded, touching briefly on Naruto's distant form. So much power, so strangely configured, neither tear magic nor wild magic, but something else entirely. Something that should not exist here. The natural order would need to be preserved. The anomaly would need to be addressed. But first, observation was required. Understanding. Assessment. The distortion faded, leaving no trace of its presence. But its attention remained fixed on the strange newcomer and the tomb of monsters now under his command. A new game had begun in the new world, one with rules the ancient entity had never encountered before. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Bonds Across Worlds. Morning light filtered through the windows of the 9th floor of Nazarick, casting long golden beams across the opulent chamber Naruto had claimed as his study. Maps and documents lay spread across a massive oak table, intelligence gathered from various sources since their arrival in this new world 3 weeks ago. Naruto leaned over a detailed map of the Baharuth Empire, tracing trade routes with his finger while several shadow clones worked around the room sorting information. 2 were compiling data on magical systems. Another was studying military formations of the local powers, while a 4th practiced manipulating the mirror of remote viewing. The Empire's political structure is fascinating, observed Demiurge, who stood opposite Naruto at the table. Emperor Jurchenov consolidated power through systematic purges of the nobility, yet maintains their cooperation through a mixture of fear and reward. A bloody path to peace, Naruto murmured. Reminds me of some approaches from my world's history. Effective in the short term, but ultimately creates a foundation built on resentment. Demiurge adjusted his spectacles, light glinting off the lenses. You disapprove of his methods, my lord. I've seen where those paths lead, Naruto replied, straightening up. The 4th Great Ninja War taught us that cycles of hatred only breed more hatred. Real peace requires understanding, not just fear. A soft knock at the door interrupted their discussion. Enter, Naruto called. Seba stepped into the room, bowing deeply. Lord Naruto, the floor guardians have assembled in the amphitheater as requested. Perfect timing, Naruto said, dispelling his shadow clones and absorbing their accumulated knowledge. Let's go, Demiurge. As they walked through Nazarick's grand corridors, Naruto noted how the denizens they passed, maids, elder liches, and various heteromorphic beings, reacted to his presence. Their reverence remained absolute, but the blind terror that had initially accompanied it had diminished. In its place, he sensed something closer to genuine respect. The staff has been adapting well to your leadership style, Demiurge commented, seemingly reading Naruto's thoughts. Though some find your methods unconventional. Naruto chuckled. Change is always uncomfortable at first. But they're learning that compassion isn't the same as weakness. They arrived at the amphitheater, an impressive circular chamber designed for addressing large gatherings. The floor GU. Ardians were already present. Albedo stood at attention, her golden eyes lighting up at Naruto's arrival. Shultir Bloodfallen adjusted her elaborate dress with obvious care. Cocytus's massive insectoid form remained perfectly still. Frost occasionally drifting from his exoskeleton. Aura and Mare Bello Fiori, the dark elf twins, sat together on a stone bench, the former energetic while the latter fidgeted nervously, and finally. Victim, the strange fetal-like guardian of the 8th floor, floated silently above a cushioned pedestal. Thank you all for coming, Naruto began, moving to the center of the space. It's been 3 weeks since we arrived in this world, and it's time to establish clear directions for Nazarik's future. The Guardians straightened attentively. I've reviewed the reports from our reconnaissance teams and studied the information we've gathered. This world is complex, with multiple nations pursuing their own agendas. The slain theocracy to the south views non-humans with suspicion and hostility. The Re-Estais kingdom struggles with noble factions undermining royal authority. The Baharuth Empire expands through military might. And beyond these human nations lie demi-human and heteromorphic territories largely unexplored. Naruto paused, making eye contact with each guardian. Our initial approach has been cautious observation, with limited interventions like the village incident. That was necessary while we gathered information. But now we need a more defined strategy. What is your will, my lord? Albedo asked, her voice carrying in the amphitheater. Nazarik will become a sanctuary and a shield, Naruto declared. Not just for ourselves, but for those who cannot protect themselves. We will build strength through alliances rather than conquest, understanding rather than domination. He noted the subtle shifts in the Guardians' expressions, surprise from some, confusion from others. This differs from the Supreme Being's original vision, Cocytus observed, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. Perhaps, Naruto acknowledged, but circumstances have changed. We're not in Yggdrasil anymore. This is a real world with real people. And in my experience, true strength comes from bonds, from protecting what's precious to you. My lord, Demiurge interjected smoothly, while I would never question your wisdom, might I inquire how this approach serves Nazarik's interests? The inhabitants of this world would view most of us as monsters to be feared and destroyed. That's exactly why we need to change perceptions, Naruto replied. In my world, I grew up feared and hated because I contained the nine-tailed fox, a being of immense destructive power. But over time, through actions rather than words, I earned trust and respect. We can do the same here. The mention of Naruto's past sparked visible interest among the Guardians. He rarely spoke of his previous life, and these glimpses into his history were treasured by his followers. How do you propose we begin? Lord Naruto, Albedo asked, her analytical mind already working through implications. First, we establish formal diplomatic contact with the Baharuth Empire, Naruto explained. Their emperor is pragmatic and values power. If we demonstrate strength while offering cooperation rather than threats, he'll listen. And if diplomacy fails? Shultir inquired, a hint of bloodlust in her crimson eyes. We have contingencies, Naruto assured her. But I believe it won't come to that. Emperor Jurchenov didn't earn the title, Bloody Emperor, by being foolish. He'll recognize the benefits of alliance with Nazarik. Naruto detailed his plan for the diplomatic mission, assigning specific roles to each guardian. Albedo and Demiurge would accompany him to the imperial capital as advisors. Shultir would coordinate defense of Nazarik in their absence. Cocytus would oversee training of their military forces, implementing new tactical approaches Naruto had designed. Ura and Mare would continue environmental reconnaissance and establish a network of safe houses throughout the region. Victim would remain in reserve, the final defense should catastrophe strike. Re's one more initiative I want to implement, Naruto said as he concluded the assignments. A training exchange. The Guardians looked at him curiously. I've been studying your abilities and comparing them to the chakra techniques from my world. There are fundamental differences, but also surprising similarities. I believe we can develop hybrid approaches that combine the best of both systems. You would teach us your techniques, my lord, Aura asked excitedly, and learn yours in return, Naruto confirmed. Every fighting style has its strengths and weaknesses. By combining approaches, we become more adaptable and therefore stronger. This proposition clearly appealed to the Guardians' desire for self-improvement in service to their master. Kokaitis's mandibles clicked in what Naruto had come to recognize as enthusiasm. A warrior must always seek new skills, the massive insectoid declared. Exactly, Naruto smiled. We'll begin training sessions after our return from the Empire. For now, focus on your assigned tasks. Prepare for departure to Arwintar in 3 days. As the meeting adjourned, Albedo approached Naruto while the other guardians filed out of the amphitheater. May I speak with you privately? My lord, she asked. Of course, Naruto replied. Let's walk. They strolled through the elaborate halls of the 9th floor, palace staff bowing respectfully as they passed. Naruto had grown more accustomed to the grandeur of Nazarick, though he still found himself missing the practical simplicity of the Hokage's office. You've changed, Nazarick, Albedo finally said when they were alone in a small courtyard garden. In just 3 weeks, you've reshaped our purpose and direction. Naruto paused by a fountain, watching the play of water. Does that trouble you? No, she replied thoughtfully. It's simply unexpected. The supreme beings created us to rule this new world, to elevate Nazarick above all others. And we will be elevated, Naruto assured her. Just not through fear and domination alone. Tell me, Albedo, what good is ruling a world of resentful subjects constantly plotting your downfall? Wouldn't you rather be surrounded by allies who stand with you by choice? Albedo considered this, her golden eyes reflecting the dancing water. Your perspective is unique. I find myself learning from it. Though I confess, some of the others struggle more with this adjustment. Change takes time, Naruto acknowledged. I don't expect everyone to embrace my approach immediately. But I hope they'll come to see its value through results. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle splash of the fountain. Naruto found himself studying Albedo's profile, the elegant curve of her horns, the perfect porcelain of her skin, the thoughtful depth in her golden eyes. Despite her inhuman features, there was a beauty to her that transcended species. You're staring, my lord, she observed with a small smile, not looking at him. Naruto felt heat rise to his cheeks. Sorry, I was just thinking that you remind me of someone from my world sometimes. She was brilliant too, strategic, loyal, fiercely protective of what mattered to her. Someone important to you? Albedo asked, her voice carefully neutral. A friend and advisor, Naruto replied. Sakura Haruno. She became the head of Konoha's medical corps. Saved my life more times than I could count. The tension in Albedo's shoulders eased slightly. You miss your world. It wasn't a question, but Naruto answered anyway. Yes, I had responsibilities there. People who depended on me. A family. His thoughts drifted to Hinata, Boruto, and Himawari, wondering if time passed differently between worlds, if they were searching for him, if they were safe. We will find a way to return you home, my lord. Albedo said with sudden determination. Naruto turned to her, surprised. Even if that means losing your master. Your happiness is paramount, she replied simply. If returning to your world would fulfill that, then it becomes Nazarick's highest priority. The sincerity in her voice touched something in Naruto. This wasn't the programmed devotion he'd initially encountered. This was a genuine concern for his well-being that transcended self-interest. Thank you, Albedo, he said softly. But for now, let's focus on our current challenges. We have an emperor to impress and a world to understand. She nodded, straightening with renewed purpose. I'll begin preparations for the diplomatic mission immediately. The empire will recognize the glory of Nazarick and the wisdom of its master. As Albedo departed to carry out her duties, Naruto remained by the fountain, reflecting on the strange path that had brought him here. In just 3 weeks, he had gone from being the 7th Hokage of Konoha to the leader of a tomb of self-proclaimed monsters in an unfamiliar world. Yet somehow, it didn't feel entirely wrong. Different, certainly, but perhaps this, too, as a form of the peace he had always sought to build. The imperial capital of Arwintar rose from the horizon like a vision from another age, a sprawling metropolis of white stone and red-tiled roofs. Surrounded by massive walls that gleamed in the midday sun, Naruto, Albedo, and Demiurge observed the city from a hilltop vantage point, having dismissed their escort of Death Knights a mile back to avoid causing unnecessary alarm. Impressive for a human settlement, Demiurge remarked. Though nothing compared to Nazarik's splendor. It has its own beauty, Naruto replied. Different, but no less valid. They had traveled for 2 days, bypassing the main roads to avoid unwanted attention. Now, dressed in formal attire designed to project authority while concealing their more unusual features, they prepared to make their official entrance. Naruto wore a modified version of his Hokage robes, black with orange accents and the symbol of Nazarik embroidered in gold where the fire kanji would normally sit. Albedo had forsaken her usual revealing white dress for an elegant diplomatic ensemble that concealed her wings, though nothing could be done about her horns. Instead, they had incorporated them into an elaborate headdress that suggested noble status. Demiurge's pointed ears and tail were similarly disguised by clever tailoring and strategic accessories. Remember the approach, Naruto reminded his companions. We're here to establish mutual respect, not dominance. The Emperor values intellect and power. We'll demonstrate both, but without threatening his position unnecessarily. A delicate balance, Demiurge observed with a thin smile. Though perhaps wasted on humans who cannot appreciate the depth of restraint we show. Naruto gave him a pointed look. Every being deserves basic respect until they prove otherwise. That's non-negotiable in my approach. Of course, my lord, Demiurge conceded smoothly. I merely observe that the Empire's own history suggests they respond better to demonstrations of superior force. Which is why we've come in person, Albedo interjected pragmatically. Our mere presence will convey more than any verbal threats could achieve. Naruto nodded in approval. Albedo had quickly adapted to his diplomatic philosophy, finding practical applications that honored his principles while acknowledging political realities. Demiurge remained more skeptical, though his absolute loyalty meant he followed Naruto's approach regardless of his personal reservations. Let's proceed, Naruto decided. Time to introduce ourselves to Emperor Jirchnev. They descended toward the main gates of Arwintar, where their arrival had already been noted by the city guard. Word of strange visitors had spread quickly after their letter of introduction had been delivered days before by one of Nazarik's more human-looking emissaries. The guards at the massive gates stood at attention, hands not quite on their weapons but ready to move at a moment's notice. Halt and identify yourselves, commanded the captain of the gate guard, a stern-faced man with a scar running down his left cheek. Naruto stepped forward. I am Naruto Uzumaki, ruler of the Great Tomb of Nazarik. These are my advisors, Albedo and Demiurge. We have business with His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Jirchnev. The captain's expression revealed nothing, but his eyes widened slightly at the name. We received word of your coming. An escort awaits to bring you to the palace. A unit of Imperial Knights in gleaming armor emerged from a nearby guardhouse. Their leader, a woman with brown hair and the bearing of a veteran soldier, stepped forward and bowed with precise formality. I am Captain Lena's Rockbrews of His Imperial Majesty's personal guard. I will escort you to the palace. Please follow me. Naruto noted the left side of her face was carefully concealed by her helm, an unusual asymmetry that suggested an old injury or perhaps something she wished to hide. He also observed that despite her polite words, her body language betrayed tension. This wasn't a standard diplomatic reception, it was a controlled interaction with potentially dangerous entities. As they followed the knights through Arwintar's broad avenues, Naruto took in the sights of the imperial capital. Unlike the medieval village they had rescued weeks earlier, the city boasted advanced infrastructure, aqueducts, sewage systems, and magical lighting along major thoroughfares. Citizens stopped to stare as they passed, whispering behind hands at the strange procession. They fear what they don't understand, Naruto observed quietly to his companions. Not so different from how the villagers in my world once looked at me. Yet you protect them anyway, Albedo replied, her tone questioning. Naruto nodded. Because everyone deserves a chance to move beyond fear. Fear is the root of hatred, and hatred is the enemy of peace. A noble sentiment, Captain Lena's commented unexpectedly, having overheard their exchange. Though perhaps idealistic in a world where some creatures exist solely to prey upon others. True predators hunt for survival, Naruto countered. The most dangerous beings are those who inflict suffering by choice, regardless of their species. The captain glanced back at him with newfound interest. An unusual philosophy for one rumored to command monsters. Perhaps that's why they follow me, Naruto replied with a smile that revealed nothing. Their conversation ended as they approached the Imperial Palace, a magnificent structure of white marble and gold accents that dominated the center of the city. Multiple defensive rings surrounded it, each manned by progressively more elite-looking guards. Magical barriers shimmered faintly between certain sections, visible to Naruto's enhanced senses. Impressive security, Demiurge noted, his analytical mind cataloging defensive measures. Though hardly impenetrable, it's not meant to be, Captain Lena's replied coolly. It's meant to be expensive, to cost an attacker more than they'd gain by success. Demiurge's smile widened fractionally, a rational calculation. Perhaps there is wisdom among humans after all. They were led through a series of increasingly ornate halls, past court officials who watched them with barely concealed curiosity and apprehension. Finally, they arrived at the doors of the Imperial Audience Chamber, where a court chamberlain awaited them. His Imperial Majesty Emperor Jurchenov Rune Farlard L. Nix will receive you now, the chamberlain announced. You will approach to the designated mark, bow, and speak only when addressed. Naruto nodded his acknowledgement of the protocol, though he had no intention of appearing subservient. As the great doors swung open, he stepped forward, with the confident posture of a Hokage, a leader in his own right meeting a potential ally, not a supplicant seeking favor. The throne room was a study in calculated majesty. Towering columns suppo, a vaulted ceiling decorated with frescoes depicting imperial victories. The marble floor was inlaid with precious metals tracing the path to the throne, which sat elevated on a dais at the far end. Guards stood at regular intervals along the walls, and court nobles lined either side of the central approach. Upon the golden throne sat a young man who could only be Emperor Jurchenov. Despite being just 22 years of age according to their intelligence, he carried himself with the confidence of a veteran ruler. His golden hair and red eyes gave him an exotic appearance, while his expression conveyed intelligent assessment rather than mere arrogance. Beside the throne stood an elderly man in ornate robes, his white beard reaching to his chest and his eyes sharp despite his advanced age. Naruto recognized him from descriptions as Fluter Paradine, the Empire's premier magic caster and one of the Emperor's closest advisors. As they reached the designated spot before the throne, Naruto offered a respectful inclination of his head, acknowledgement between equals rather than the deep bow expected from subjects. A murmur ran through the court at this subtle defiance. Emperor Jurchenev's eyes narrowed fractionally, but a slight smile played at the corner of his mouth. So, the Emperor said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, you are the mysterious Naruto Uzumaki we have heard such interesting reports about. The one who intervened when my knights were carrying out their duty in Carne Village. If duty means slaughtering innocent villagers, then yes, Naruto replied evenly. Though I'm sure that wasn't your direct order, Your Majesty. A leader of your reputation would understand that massacring tax-delinquent farmers creates more problems than it solves. Enough. Our ripple of shock passed through the court at Naruto's directness. The Emperor, however, seemed more amused than offended. You speak boldly for a visitor in my throne room, Jurchenov observed. Either foolishly brave or confident in your position. I prefer to think of it as honest, Naruto replied. I'm not here to exchange empty pleasantries or veiled threats, Emperor Jurchenov. I'm here to establish a relationship based on mutual respect and potential cooperation. The elderly Fluter Paradine stepped forward slightly. Your Majesty, if I may. I sense unusual energy from these visitors, particularly their leader. It is unlike any magic I have encountered in my studies. Is that so, old friend? The Emperor glanced at his advisor. Perhaps a demonstration might be informative. Fluter nodded eagerly. Indeed, Your Majesty. Naruto recognized the request for what it was. A test of his capabilities and a way for the Empire to gauge the threat he potentially represented. I'd be happy to demonstrate, Naruto agreed. With your permission, Emperor. Jurchenov gestured his assent, and the court guards tensed in anticipation. Naruto formed a simple hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 Perfy. Court duplicates of Naruto appeared in a semicircle behind him, each identical down to the smallest detail. Unlike illusions, these were physical copies that could interact with their environment, a fact Naruto demonstrated by having each clone perform different actions simultaneously. Fluter Paradigm's eyes widened in undisguised fascination. Extraordinary. Not illusion magic, but true replication without apparent spell components or incantations. An impressive parlor trick, Jirchnev acknowledged, though his calculated expression suggested he recognized the tactical implications. But hardly unique in a world of tier magic. Naruto dispelled the clones and smiled. Just a basic technique from my world, Your Majesty. One of many at my disposal. But I didn't come here to impress you with displays of power. I came to discuss matters of mutual interest. And what interests might we share? Jirchnev inquired, leaning forward slightly. What does the master of Nazarick want from the Baharuth Empire? Recognition and non-interference to start, Naruto replied honestly. Nazarick claims the territory surrounding our location as sovereign domain. In return, we offer the Empire preferred trading status, magical knowledge exchange, and potential military alliance against mutual threats. The Emperor's eyes gleamed with interest. Generous terms. What's the catch? Ethical governance, Naruto stated flatly. I won't ally with those who abuse their own citizens or wage war for mere conquest. The Empire must commit to humane treatment of its subjects and proportionate response to threats. Murmurs of disbelief echoed through the court. Jirchnev actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of genuine surprise. You come to my palace and dictate the internal policies of my empire? He asked, incredulity evident in his tone. I state conditions for our alliance, Naruto corrected calmly. You're free to refuse. But consider this, Emperor, the world is changing. New powers are emerging. Whoa, wouldn't you rather have Nazarick as an ally than a potential adversary? A tense silence fell over the throne room. Jirchnev studied Naruto with new intensity, reassessing the strange visitor and his unusual demands. You interest me, Naruto Uzumaki, he finally said. Most who seek alliance either grovel or threaten. You do neither, yet somehow manage to be both respectful and challenging. A rare combination. The Emperor rose from his throne, a signal that the formal audience was concluding. We will consider your proposal. In the meantime, you and your advisors will be my honored guests. Avenue prepared suitable accommodations in the diplomatic wing. Tonight, you will join me for dinner, where we can continue our discussion in a more private setting. Naruto bowed his head in acknowledgement. We look forward to it, Your Majesty. As they were escorted from the throne room by Captain Lanas, Naruto could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes upon them, some curious, others fearful, a few calculating. They had made an impression, which was precisely what he had intended. Bold strategy, my lord, Demiurge murmured once they were out of earshot of the court. The Emperor is intrigued rather than offended. He's smarter than most give him credit for, Naruto replied. He recognizes potential advantage when he sees it. And the condition regarding ethical governance? Albedo inquired. Is that truly a requirement for alliance? Naruto nodded firmly. Absolutely. I won't repeat the mistakes of the past. Alliances without shared values eventually collapse under their own contradictions. As they were shown to their luxurious guest quarters, Naruto couldn't help but feel he was being watched by more than just the obvious guards and servants. Something lurked at the edges of High's chakra senses, a faint probing energy that reminded him of sensor-type ninja from his world. He smiled faintly. Of course the Empire would have its own information-gathering techniques. He had expected nothing less. Let them watch, Naruto thought. They would see only what he chose to reveal, and perhaps learn something valuable in the process. That evening, Naruto found himself seated at an NTLY appointed table in the Emperor's private dining chamber. The setting was intimate by imperial standards, only 8 people present, including Naruto and his advisors, Emperor Jirchnev, Fluter Paradigm, and 2 high-ranking nobles who had been introduced as members of the Emperor's inner circle. You must forgive the limited guest list, Jirchnev remarked as servants poured wine into crystal goblets. I find larger gatherings tedious when actual business is to be conducted. I couldn't agree more, Naruto replied, thinking of the interminable formal dinners he'd endured as Hokage. Substance over ceremony. The Emperor smiled slightly. We find common ground already. Tell me, then, where do you really come from? My intelligence suggests you appeared quite suddenly in this region, with no prior history. Naruto took a sip of wine, considering his response. Truth would serve better than evasion in this case. I'm from another world entirely, he said simply. I was transported here through circumstances I don't fully understand yet. Fluter Paradine leaned forward, his aged eyes alight with intellectual hunger. Another world, not one of the 9 realms of Yggdrasil. No, Naruto confirmed. A world called Earth, with its own nations, history, and power systems. I was the leader of Konohagakure, the village hidden in the leaves, one of the 5 great shinobi nations. Fascinating, Fluter breathed. And the energy you manipulate, it differs fundamentally from our tier magic, doesn't it? We call it chakra, Naruto explained. It's a combination of physical and spiritual energy that flows through all living beings. Shinobi, ninja, learn to control and shape it for various techniques. The old magic caster's eyes gleamed with undisguised excitement. Would you permit me to study this chakra? The magical implications could be revolutionary. Perhaps an exchange of knowledge, Naruto suggested diplomatically. I'm still learning about tier magic myself. A reasonable arrangement, Jirchnev interjected, steering the conversation back to political matters. But let us be direct. What exactly is Nazarick? My scouts report a massive underground structure that seemingly appeared overnight, yet with defensive capabilities that discouraged closer investigation. Albedo answered this time, her voice smooth and precise. The Great Tomb of Nazarick is a fortress of unparalleled design, created by beings of immense power. It houses treasures and knowledge beyond comprehension, protected by guardians sworn to Lord Naruto. And these guardians, one of the nobles inquired cautiously, they are not human. Are they? Nazarick is home to many species, Naruto replied. Just as the world contains humans, elves, dwarves, and others, Nazarick's denizens represent diverse origins and abilities. What matters is their character, not their appearance. The Emperor studied Naruto over the rim of his wine glass. Noble sentiments, yet unusual for one commanding such power. Most in your position would simply take what they desire. I've seen where that path leads, Naruto said, his voice taking on a harder edge. Endless cycles of hatred and revenge that consume generations. I prefer to build something that lasts. A visionary, then, Jirchnev observed with a hint of skepticism. Though visions often shatter against reality. Mine hasn't yet, Naruto countered with a confident smile. And I've faced gods and demons to protect it. The dinner continued with this delicate dance of revelation and concealment, probe and parry. Jirchnev was indeed as intelligent as rumors suggested, asking incisive questions that sought to expose Nazarick's capabilities and intentions while revealing little about his own long-term strategy. For his part, Naruto maintained a balance of honesty and discretion. Guided by subtle cues from Albedo and Demiurge when imperial questions ventured into sensitive territory. He allowed the Emperor to see enough to respect Nazarick's power without revealing their full capabilities. As the meal concluded, Fluter Paradine approached Naruto directly while the Emperor was engaged in conversation with Demiurge about trade implications. Lord Uzumaki, the elderly magic caster said quietly, I wonder if you might indulge an old man's curiosity. Would you permit me to observe your chakra directly? I have spent my life pursuing magical knowledge, and the opportunity to study an entirely new energy system is irresistible. Naruto considered the request. Fluter's reputation as a magical researcher was well established in their intelligence briefings. Though he served the Empire loyally, his true passion was the pursuit of arcane knowledge. I'm willing to demonstrate, Naruto decided, though I sense your interest goes beyond mere academic curiosity. Fluter's eyes widened slightly at being so easily read. Perceptive. Indeed, I seek to understand the depth of your power. In my long life, I have rarely encountered beings whose abilities exceeded my comprehension. And if you found such a being? Naruto asked. I would do whatever necessary to learn from them, Fluter admitted without hesitation. Knowledge is the only immortality available to humans. Naruto nodded, understanding the old man's hunger. It reminded him of Orochimaru in some ways, though without the moral corruption that had defined the Sanin's pursuit of power. Very well, he agreed. A brief demonstration. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment, focusing his chakra. When he opened them again, he allowed his energy to flow visibly, a shimmering aura of blue that gradually shifted to golden as he accessed a fraction of his sage powers. Fluter stumbled back, his aged face transformed by awe. Incredible, he whispered. The depth, the purity, it's beyond anything in the known tiers. Quote. The commotion drew the attention of the others. Emperor Jurchnev watched with sharp interest as his chief magic caster seemed transfixed by whatever he perceived in Naruto's aura. What do you see, Fluter? The Emperor demanded. Magic? No. Power, beyond measurement, Fluter replied, his voice trembling with emotion. Like staring into the sun. Naruto allowed the visible manifestation to fade, though he noted with interest that Fluter's reaction had been even stronger than anticipated. Clearly, the magic systems of this world interacted with chakra in ways he didn't fully understand yet. A glimpse only, Naruto said quietly to the old magic caster. There is much more to learn, on both sides. Fluter bowed deeply, an instinctive gesture of respect that seemed to surprise even him. I would give much for the opportunity to study under your guidance, Lord Uzumaki. The evening concluded shortly after this exchange, with Emperor Jurchen Sugas. They reconvened the following day to continue discussions. As they were escorted back to their quarters, Demiurge spoke softly. The magic caster is ripe for recruitment, my lord. His loyalty to knowledge exceeds his loyalty to empire. Quote. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. I noticed, but I won't exploit that weakness carelessly. If Fluter chooses to align with Nazarick, it should be a considered decision, not manipulation. Your mercy continues to surprise me, Demiurge observed. Even potential advantages are tempered by ethical considerations. That's not mercy, Naruto corrected. It's long-term thinking. Allies gained through respect last longer than those acquired through deception. Back in the privacy of their quarters, Albedo reviewed the evening's developments. The Emperor is cautious but intrigued. He sees potential value in an alliance with Nazarick, yet fears becoming dependent or subservient. Exactly as we expected, Naruto agreed. Tomorrow we'll present the formal treaty proposal, with enough benefits to make it attractive and enough independence to preserve his pride. And if he refuses? Albedo asked. Naruto gazed out the window at the imperial capital spread below them. Lights twinkling in the darkness. Then we maintain respectful distance and seek other allies. I won't force anyone into partnership, not even when I have the power to do so. Albedo studied him in the dim light, her golden eyes reflecting the distant city fires. Your approach remains foreign to my original programming, she admitted, yet I find myself understanding it more each day. That's growth, Naruto told her with a gentle smile. The ability to reconsider established views in light of new evidence. It's one of the most valuable traits anyone can possess. Their conversation was interrupted by a subtle knock at the door. Demiurge answered it, revealing a palace servant bearing a sealed message. From His Imperial Majesty, the servant announced, bowing as he presented the letter. Once alone again, Naruto broke the wax seal and read the Emperor's elegant handwriting. Interesting, he murmured. Jurchnev requests a private audience tomorrow morning, just the two of us. No advisors, no guards. A trap, Albedo suggested, immediately suspicious. No, Naruto replied, considering the implications. A test, perhaps, but not a trap. He wants to speak ruler to ruler, without the constraints of court protocol or advisors' agendas. It's unacceptably dangerous, Albedo objected. You would be vulnerable without protection. Naruto laughed softly. Albedo, I survived fourth grade ninja war and battled the goddess Kagaya. I think I can handle one breakfast meeting with an emperor. Nevertheless, she insisted, we should establish precautions. Perhaps disguised guards are a communication link. I'll take one precaution, Naruto conceded, forming a hand sign. A shadow clone popped into existence beside him. My clone will remain with you and Demiurge. If anything happens to me, it will dispel and transfer all its knowledge instantly. Albedo frowned but nodded reluctantly. Acceptable, though I still disapprove. The genuine concern in her voice touched something in Naruto. It reminded him of his friends back in Konoha, of Shikamaru's pragmatic worry, Sakura's protective scolding, Hinata's quiet support. I'll be careful, he promised her. That's the best I can offer. Dawn broke over Arwintar, painting the white marble buildings with golden light. Naruto followed a silent palace guard through secluded corridors, noting how their path avoided main hallways and public spaces. Clearly, the Emperor valued discretion for this meeting. They emerged onto a private terrace overlooking the palace gardens. Emperor Jurchnev was already present, dressed more casually than during their formal audience, though no less regal. He stood at the balustrade, watching the sunrise, and turned as Naruto approached. "Lord Uzumaki," he greeted, dismissing the guard with a gesture. "Thank you for honoring my request for privacy." "Your Majesty," Naruto replied with a respectful nod. "I appreciate the opportunity to speak directly." Jurchnev gestured toward a small table set with breakfast foods and steaming tea. "Please, join me, and let us dispense with excessive formality. In private, Jurchnev, will suffice." "Then you must call me Naruto," he replied, taking a seat opposite the Emperor. Jurchnev poured tea for them both, a surprisingly humble gesture from an absolute monarch. "I requested this meeting because there are matters I wished to discuss without the political theater that normally surrounds imperial business." "I understand completely," Naruto said, thinking of his own frustrations with the formal constraints of the Hokage's office. "So, Metime's leader to leader is the only way to achieve real clarity." "Precisely." Jurchnev took a sip of his tea, studying Naruto over the rim of his cup. "Let me be blunt, you are unlike any being I have encountered in my admittedly short but eventful reign. Your power is evident, yet you choose diplomacy over domination. Why?" Naruto considered his answer carefully. "Because true leadership isn't out controlling others, it's about inspiring them toward a better path. I learned that lesson through painful experience." "A noble sentiment," Jurchnev observed, "but surely naive in practical application. The world responds to strength, not ideals." "Does it?" Naruto challenged. "Look at your own empire. You consolidated power through decisive action, yes, but you maintain it through competent governance and strategic alliances. Fear creates temporary compliance, respect creates lasting loyalty." The Emperor smiled faintly. "You've studied me well. I make a point of understanding potential allies," Naruto replied. Jurchnev leaned forward slightly. "Then understand this. My primary concern is the security and prosperity of the Baharuth Empire. Everything else is secondary." "As it should be," Naruto acknowledged. "Just as my primary concern is the security and prosperity of Nazarick. The question isn't whether we prioritize our own people, but whether we believe mutual benefit is possible." "And you believe it is." "I know it is," Naruto stated confidently. "Nazarick offers magical and tactical capabilities your empire lacks. You offer established infrastructure and political legitimacy we haven't yet built. Together, we're stronger than either would be in opposition." Jurchnev selected a piece of fruit from the breakfast spread, considering Naruto's words. "A compelling argument, but I must ask, what happens when our interests inevitably conflict?" "We negotiate as we're doing now," Naruto replied simply. "With honesty and mutual respect. Perfect alignment is impossible, what matters is how we handle disagreement." The Emperor nodded slowly, his ruby eyes calculating. "One final question, then. These ethical governance conditions you mentioned, are they truly non-negotiable?" "They are," Naruto confirmed without hesitation. "I won't ally with those who abuse the power entrusted to them. That said, I recognize reform takes time. I don't expect perfection, just sincere commitment to improvement." "Interesting," Jurchnev murmured. "Most beings of your apparent power would simply impose their will rather than negotiating moral boundaries." "I'm not most beings," Naruto replied with a slight smile. "And imposing my will would violate the very principles I'm advocating." Their conversation continued through breakfast, shifting to more specific aspects of their potential alliance. Jurchnev proved to be surprisingly forthcoming about the Empire's challenges, tensions with the kingdom, the aggressive proselytizing of the slain theocracy, economic pressures from recent military campaigns. Naruto, in turn, shared selected information about Nazarick's capabilities and goals, careful to maintain necessary strategic ambiguity while demonstrating good faith. As their meeting concluded, Jurchnev rose and extended his hand in the manner of imperial nobles, a gesture of respect between equals rather than the formal bow protocol would normally dictate. "I believe we can work together, Naruto Uzumaki," the Emperor declared, There are details to be negotiated, of course, but the foundation seems sound. Naruto accepted the handshake, sensing a genuine shift in the Emperor's attitude from calculating assessment to cautious acceptance. I look forward to a productive partnership, Jirchnev, he replied. For the benefit of both our realms. Later that day, in a more formal setting with advisors present, they signed the preliminary agreement, a non-aggression pact with provisions for knowledge exchange, trade privileges, and mutual defense consultation. It was a modest beginning, but an important one. As they prepared to depart Arwintar the following morning, Fluter Paradine approached them in the palace courtyard, a determined expression on his aged face. Lord Uzumaki, the old magic caster said, bowing deeply, I have obtained His Majesty's permission to accompany you to Nazarick as part of our knowledge exchange initiative. If you are amenable, of course. Naruto glanced at Albedo, who gave a nearly imperceptible nod. They had anticipated this possibility and prepared accordingly. We would be honored, Fluter, Naruto replied. Your expertise will be valuable as we explore the intersection of our magical systems. The journey back to Nazarick proceeded smoothly, though Naruto noted with interest how Fluter's initial scholarly excitement gradually transformed into stunned awe as they approached the great tomb and its true scale became apparent. Magnificent, the old magic caster breathed as they passed through the massive gates guarded by towering statues. I had heard descriptions, but they scarcely do justice to the reality. Wait until you see the interior, Naruto told him with a smile. Indeed, Fluter's reaction to the splendor of Nazarick's halls, the diverse nature of its inhabitants, and the palpable magical energy permeating every level was one of progressive amazement. By the time they reached the sixth-floor amphitheater, Naruto had arranged a demonstration of various guardians' abilities. The Empire's premier magic caster was practically vibrating with intellectual excitement. In all my centuries of research, Fluter declared, watching Mare manipulate earth elements with casual ease, I have never encountered such varied and powerful magical expressions. It is as though Nazarick exists outside the normal constraints of tier magic. In some ways, it does, Naruto confirmed. The beings who created Nazarick operated on principles different from those governing this world. That's part of what we hope to understand through collaboration. Over the following days, Naruto established a structured knowledge exchange program. Fluter would share his extensive understanding of tier magic theory, local magical creatures, and historical developments in magical practice. In return, Naruto introduced basic concepts of chakra manipulation, starting with the fundamental principles of physical and spiritual energy balance. To his surprise, several of the guardians showed aptitude for chakra exercises. Aura, with her physical vitality, quickly grasped the concept of molding bodily energy. Mare, attuned to natural forces through druidic magic, showed promise with spiritual energy manipulation. Even Albedo, whose nature should have been incompatible with human-style chakra, demonstrated the ability to sense and influence energy flows. Your adaptability is impressive, Naruto told them during a training session in the arena. It typically takes academy students years to develop the control you're showing after just days of practice. We were created to serve the supreme beings, Cocytus replied, frost forming around his mandibles as he concentrated on channeling chakra through his massive frame. Adapting to your techniques is our duty and honor. Still, there's something unusual about how quickly you're progressing, Naruto observed. It's as if your existing magical abilities provide a framework that chakra can build upon. Fluter, who had been observing the training with rapt attention, offered his theory. Perhaps it's a matter of dimensional resonance. Your chakra and our worlds. Magic may operate on different frequencies but follow similar fundamental laws. The guardians, being magical constructs themselves, could serve as natural conduits for this resonance. The old magic caster's insight proved valuable as they continued their experiments. Under Naruto's guidance, they began developing hybrid techniques that combined chakra principles with tier magic applications. Shaw Tear discovered that infusing her blood magic with chakra increased its potency while reducing the energy cost. Demiurge found that command mantras enhanced with chakra affected a wider range of subjects. Even simple defensive barriers became more resilient when reinforced with the proper chakra flow. For his part, Naruto absorbed knowledge of tier magic with the voracity that had characterized his learning style since childhood. While he couldn't cast spells in the traditional sense, he found ways to approximate their effects using chakra equivalents. A modified wind release could replicate fly with greater maneuverability. Water and lightning nature transformations combined could simulate lightning strike with precise targeting. Your learning capacity is remarkable, Fluter comment. Ted one evening as they reviewed scrolls in Nazarik's vast library. Most magic casters require years to master even adjacent tiers. I've always been a hands-on learner, Naruto replied with a grin. Remembering his struggles with academic subjects at the academy. Show me once, and I'll figure out the rest through practice. The elderly magic caster hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been on his mind for days. Lord Uzumaki, if I may be so bold, what is the extent of your power? I've sensed only glimpses, but they suggest depths beyond my comprehension. Naruto considered how to answer. Fluter's loyalty was still primarily to knowledge rather than to Nazarik specifically, making full disclosure unwise. Yet dismissing the question entirely would squander the trust they'd built. I've faced beings who could destroy worlds, Naruto said finally. And survived. That's perhaps the most accurate measure I can offer. Fluter's eyes widened. World-class entities. Truly. He seemed both terrified and exhilarated by the possibility. The specifics aren't important, Naruto continued. What matters is that power without purpose is meaningless. I became strong to protect what was precious to me, not to dominate others. This philosophy clearly puzzled Fluter, whose lifetime pursuit of magical knowledge had been driven by ambition and fear of death rather than protective instinct. Yet something in Naruto's words seemed to resonate with him nonetheless. A novel perspective, the old man murmured. Using power as a shield rather than a sword. Perhaps there is wisdom in this approach I have overlooked. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sebas, who bowed formally before addressing Naruto. My lord, Lady Albedo requests your presence in the communication center. Surveillance has detected unusual activity in the northern mountain range that requires your attention. Naruto nodded. Please excuse me, Fluter. Demiurge will continue your instruction while I attend to this matter. In the communication center, a chamber filled with scrying equipment and magical monitoring devices, Albedo stood before the mirror of remote viewing, her expression uncharacteristically concerned. What have you found? Naruto asked, joining her at the mirror. Observe, my lord, she replied, gesturing to the image displayed on the surface. The mirror showed a remote mountain valley approximately 200 miles north of Nazarik. What caught Naruto's attention immediately was the unnatural movement of the terrain, rocks shifting, trees bending, as if something massive was stirring beneath the surface. How long has this been happening? He asked, studying the disturbance pattern. The anomaly was first detected 3 days ago, Albedo reported. It has been escalating steadily. Our scouts initially believed it to be seismic activity, but the pattern is too deliberate. Naruto frowned, focusing his senses on the image. Something about the energy signature felt familiar. Though he couldn't immediately place it. Magnify that section, he instructed, pointing to a particularly active area. As the mirror zoomed in, a gleam of something metallic became visible beneath the shifting earth. Scales, perhaps, or armor, in a deep crimson hue. Is that what I think it is? Naruto asked quietly. Albedo nodded, her golden eyes grave. A dragon, my lord. And not an ordinary one. The energy readings suggest an ancient being of considerable power. Naruto's mind raced through the implications. According to the information they'd gathered, dragons in this world were divided into categories of increasing power and intelligence. The most formidable, the Dragon Lords, were beings of such might that entire nations structured their defense policies around avoiding their wrath. Could it be a Dragon Lord? He asked. The signature is consistent with historical records, Albedo confirmed. Though this particular entity doesn't match any documented individual in the Empire's archives. Naruto studied the movement patterns more carefully. It's awakening, he realized. After what appears to be a very long dormancy. The question is, why now? Perhaps, Myerge's voice came from the doorway as he entered. Our arrival triggered it. The transportation event that brought Nazarik to this world released considerable magical energy. It may have disturbed ancient entities attuned to such disturbances. The theory made uncomfortable sense. Naruto had seen similar phenomena in his own world, powerful beings responding to disruptions in natural energy like. The 10 tails are the breaking of significant seals. How long until it fully awakens? He asked. Albedo consulted the monitoring data. At the current rate of activity, complete emergence will occur within 5 to 7 days. And when it does? Naruto pressed. Based on historical accounts of dragon lords, Demiurge replied, it will likely establish territorial dominance through force. The NEA, Rest Human Settlement, is the fortress city of Feobarkana, an imperial military outpost with approximately 20,000 inhabitants. The implications were clear. If an ancient dragon of immense power awoke and sought to assert dominance, countless innocent lives would be threatened. We need more information, Naruto decided. Demiurge, consult with Fluter about dragon lore, especially regarding ancient specimens and their behavioral patterns. Albedo, prepare a reconnaissance team to observe the site directly. I want detailed assessments of the entity's power level and abilities as soon as possible. And what of Feobarkana? Albedo inquired. Should we warn the imperial authorities? Naruto considered this carefully. Their alliance with the Empire was new and untested. Providing warning of a potential catastrophic threat would demonstrate good faith, but could also expose Nazarik's surveillance capabilities. Send a message to Emperor Jurchnev, he decided. Frame it as informatio. Received from scouts rather than magical surveillance. Recommend precautionary evacuation of Feobarkana but avoid creating panic. Offer Nazarik's assistance if needed. As his guardians moved to implement these directives, Naruto continued studying the awakening dragon. Something about the energy pattern nagged at his shinobi instincts, a familiar resonance he couldn't quite place. Over the next 2 days, information accumulated rapidly. Fluter's extensive knowledge of draconic lore, combined with direct reconnaissance by Mare and Aura, painted a concerning picture. The entity was indeed a dragon lord, specifically a creature the historical texts referred to as the infernal scale dragon lord, a being of fire and earth magic thought to have perished centuries ago during conflicts with the 8 Greed Kings. Its elemental affinity appears strongest with fire, Mare reported timidly after returning from observation. The surrounding mountains have begun to heat dramatically, and magma chambers beneath the surface are becoming active. Local wildlife is fleeing the region en masse, Aura added, her heterochromatic eyes serious. Even magical beasts that normally fear nothing are abandoning their territories. Emperor Jurchnev's response to Naruto's warning had been prompt and pragmatic, immediately dispatching his 4 imperial knights to Feobarkana with evacuation orders. However, the fortress city's commander was reportedly resistant, questioning the credibility of unverified threats and the emperor's excessive caution. Military pride. Naruto sighed when he received this update. Some things are universal across worlds. The fools risk their entire population, Albedo observed coldly. Perhaps they should be allowed to face the consequences of their arrogance. No, Naruto replied firmly. Regardless of their leader's decisions, the citizens of Feobarkana deserve protection. If the city won't evacuate, then we'll need to deal with the threat directly. By the 5th day, the dragon's awakening had accelerated dramatically. The entire mountain valley glowed with heat, visible even from great distances, and seismic tremors rattled settlements up to 50 miles away. The mirror of remote viewing showed massive fractures forming in the earth as the creature prepared to emerge. It will fully awaken by tomorrow, Demiurge reported during an emergency council in the throne room. Based on our calculations, it possesses power equivalent to a level 95 entity, with particular strength in area effect destructive magic. Can Nazarik's forces handle such a threat? Naruto asked bluntly. The guardians exchanged glances before Albedo answered. Yes, my lord, though not without cost. The Dragon Lord's fire magic would be especially effective against our undead forces, requiring deployment of our higher-tier guardians. Naruto nodded thoughtfully. Then we need a strategy that minimizes risk while maximizing impact. I won't unnecessarily endanger Nazarik's defenders. Through the night, they planned their approach, combining Naruto's tactical experience from countless ninja operations with the Guardians' knowledge of Nazarik's capabilities. They developed a multi-phase strategy to neutralize the dragon threat. Aura and Mare would create a containment zone using environmental manipulation to channel the dragon's movement. Cocytus, with his ice abilities, would counter the creature's fire magic. Ainz and Albedo would lead the direct assault force, targeting vulnerable points identified through reconnaissance. And Naruto himself would serve as both coordinator and final countermeasure, ready to engage directly if the situation demanded it. What about Fluter? Albedo asked during the planning session. His presence complicates operational security. Actually, he could be valuable, Naruto replied. His knowledge of tier magic might identify weaknesses we'd otherwise miss. And involving him demonstrates our commitment to the Empire's welfare. As dawn broke on the 6th day, tremors strong enough to register in Nazarick signaled the dragon's imminent emergence. Scrying showed massive fissures opening in the northern mountains, magma welling up through the cracks, and a terrifying roar echoing across the landscape as something enormous shifted beneath the tortured earth. It's time, Naruto announced to the assembled guardians. Move out according to plan. Remember, our goal is containment and neutralization with minimal collateral damage. Using a combination of teleportation magic and Naruto's Flying Thunder God technique, which he'd finally adapted to this world's magical matrix, the strike force positioned themselves strategically around the awakening site. From a vantage point atop a neighboring peak, Naruto and Fluter observed as the infernal scale dragon lord finally broke free of its earthen prison. The creature was magnificent in its terrible beauty, nearly 300 feet from snout to tail, its scales like burnished copper that glowed red-hot along the edges. 6 horns crowned its massive head, and wings that seemed formed of solidified flame unfurled slowly as it stretched its ancient limbs. The very air shimmered with heat around its body, and where its claws touched the ground, stone melted into bubbling pools. By the gods, Fluter whispered, his academic detachment momentarily forgotten in the face of such primal power. I've studied dragon lore all my life, but never imagined. Focus, Fluter, Naruto reminded him gently. What can you tell me about its magical signatures? The old magic caster visibly gathered himself, raising a staff inscribed with analytical runes. Multiple 7th-tier fire spells maintaining constantly around its body. Something deeper beneath. Likely wild magic rather than tier magic. And a curious resonance pattern in its roar, possibly a form of sound-based attack magic. Naruto nodded, relaying this information to the Guardians through their communication items. Below, the operation had begun. Mare's magic reshaped the landscape, creating barriers of densely compressed earth to channel the dragon's movement away from populated areas. Simultaneously, Aura deployed magical beasts under her control to establish a perimeter, ensuring no bystanders wandered into the battle zone. The dragon, fully emerged now, surveyed its surroundings its ancient intelligence burning in its molten gold eyes. When it spoke, the very air vibrated with power. Who dares intrude upon my awakening? Its voice rumbled like an avalanche, addressing no one in particular. The world has changed during my slumber. I sense new powers, foreign energies that should not exist. Naruto tensed. The dragon had detected them specifically, not just any observers, but Nazarick's unique energy signature. His suspicion that their arrival had triggered the awakening seemed increasingly likely. The dragon's massive head swung toward their position, nostrils flaring as it caught their scent on the wind. Show yourselves, intruders. Face the judgment of Jormungandr, Lord of the Infernal Scale. Time for Phase 2, Naruto murmured, creating a shadow clone to Rima. In with Fluter while he himself vanished in a flash of yellow light. He reappeared directly in the dragon's line of sight, standing atop a stone pillar created by Mare's magic. Alone and seemingly vulnerable, he served as the perfect distraction, exactly as planned. I am Naruto Uzumaki of Nazarick, he called out, his voice enhanced with chakra to carry against the dragon's rumbling presence. We mean you no harm, Jormungandr. But we cannot allow you to threaten the surrounding lands. The dragon's laughter sent cascades of molten rock sliding down the mountainside. A human dares address me as an equal. Your arrogance exceeds even your kind's typical folly. Not human, Naruto corrected. Not exactly, and definitely not arrogant, just practical. While he maintained the dragon's attention, Cocytus had moved into position behind the massive creature, channeling frigid energy through his weapons. On Naruto's signal, the insectoid guardian released a devastating ice attack aimed at the dragon's wings, its most vulnerable and tactically important feature. Jormungandr roared in pain and fury as frost crystallized along the edges of his fiery wings, temporarily dampening their heat. He hurled with surprising speed for such a massive being, jaws opening to unleash a torrent of magical flame toward Cocytus. Infernal Cascade. The dragon intoned, the spell manifesting as concentric rings of increasingly intense fire. Cocytus met the attack with his own ice magic, creating a massive steam cloud where the opposing elements collided. Through this obscuring vapor, Demiurge and Albedo launched their assault from opposite flanks, targeting weak points in the dragon's scaled armor. Albedo's halberd, enchanted with special runes for the operation, struck the junction between neck and shoulder where the scales were smallest. Simultaneously, Demiurge unleashed a combination of command magic and hellfire that temporarily disrupted the dragon's magical defenses. Jormungandr thrashed in rage and pain, its tail sweeping across the battlefield and shattering Mare's earthen barriers. The young dark elf squeaked in alarm, hastily reinforcing his constructs while dodging debris. This creature exceeds our initial power estimates, Albedo reported through their communication link. Its defensive capabilities are regenerating faster than anticipated. Naruto observed the battle dynamics with growing concern. Their coordinated assault was effective but insufficient for a quick victory. Meanwhile, the dragon's rage was intensifying, along with the environmental effects of its magic. The surrounding mountains were beginning to destabilize, magma chambers swelling dangerously beneath the surface. If they didn't end this soon, the collateral damage could extend far beyond the IMM-88 battlefield, potentially reaching Feoberkana despite their containment efforts. Fall back to position Delta, Naruto ordered through the communication items. I'm implementing contingency Omega. The Guardians disengaged with practiced precision, withdrawing to predetermined positions that formed a perfect hexagram around the dragon. Jormungandr, bleeding from several wounds but far from defeated, roared in triumph at their apparent retreat. You recognize your folly at last, the Dragon Lord declared. Perhaps I shall be merciful and make your deaths swift before I reclaim my ancient territory. I wouldn't celebrate just yet, Naruto replied calmly. He closed his eyes, focusing his chakra in a way he hadn't needed to since arriving in this world. The abundant natural energy of his pristine environment responded eagerly to his call, flowing into his body through practiced pathways. Orange pigmentation appeared around his eyes as he entered Sage mode, his senses expanding exponentially to encompass the battlefield and beyond. Through Sage-enhanced perception, Naruto could see the true nature of the dragon's power, a swirling matrix of fire-aspected energy anchored to a core of something deeper and more primal. This wild magic, as Fluter had called it, pulsed like a heartbeat at the center of the creature's being. Interesting, Naruto murmured. It's structurally similar to Tailed Beast Chakra, but with different fundamental properties. With this insight, he modified his approach. Instead of a direct assault, he formed a complex sequence of hand seals, channeling Age Chakra into a technique he hadn't used in years. 6 paths. Planetary devastation, Naruto intoned softly. The effects were immediate and dramatic. Gravity itself seemed to warp around the dragon, creating a localized field that pulled inward with tremendous force. Rocks, debris, and even the air itself began spiraling toward a focal point just above Jormungandr's massive body. The dragon roared in confusion and anger, its wings beating powerfully against the inexorable pull. What manner of magic is this? It demanded. No human spell controls fundamental forces. I told you, Naruto replied, maintaining his concentration as sweat beaded on his forehead. I'm not exactly human. As the gravitational vortex intensified, the Guardians implemented the second phase of contingency Omega. From their positions marking the hexagram points, they channeled their energies in perfect synchronization, creating a containment barrier that prevented the dragon's wild magic from dispersing destructively as Naruto's technique compressed it. Jormungandr, recognizing the existential threat, abandoned all pretense of arrogance. Wait, the dragon called out, its voice losing some of its thunderous quality. I yield. There is no need for this conflict. Naruto maintained the technique but reduced its intensity slightly. Speak quickly, he commanded. Why did you awaken now, after centuries of slumber? The dragon's golden eyes fixed on Naruto, ancient intelligence assessing him anew. I was bound in magical slumber by the 8 greed kings after our great war. The binding was tied to the world's fundamental balance. I would awaken only if a power appeared that threatened the natural order. And you believe we are that threat? Naruto asked. Not you specifically, Jormungandr clarified. The foreign energy that entered this world recently, energy that does not belong to our reality structure. I sensed it even in my dreams, pulling me toward consciousness. Naruto exchanged glances with Albedo, who had moved closer during this exchange. They both understood the implications. Nazarik's transportation to this world, or more specifically, Naruto's arrival with his chakra system, had disrupted some fundamental magical equilibrium. If what you say is true, Naruto said, further easing the gravitational pressure, then your quarrel isn't with the inhabitants of this region. It's with me. Perhaps not even a quarrel, the dragon replied thoughtfully. My purpose was to investigate the disturbance, not necessarily to destroy it. The 8 greed kings were thorough in their binding spells. My initial rage was as much a product of their magic as my own nature. Naruto fully released the planetary devastation technique, though the guardians maintained their containment barrier as a precaution. He approached the dragon directly, still glowing with sage energy. I propose a resolution, Naruto offered. You've confirmed the source of the disturbance, me and my people. We aren't here to disrupt this world's balance intentionally. If you'll agree to peaceful coexistence, we'll work to minimize our impact on the world's natural energies. Jormungandr lowered his massive head, bringing one enormous golden eye level with Naruto. You are a curious being, the dragon observed. Your power is unmistakable, yet you seek harmony rather than dominance. This is uncommon in my experience. I've found harmony leads to greater strength than dominance ever could, Naruto replied simply. After a tense moment, the dragon inclined his head in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. Very well, Naruto Uzumaki of Nazarik, I accept your proposal. I shall return to my ancient territories in the deeper mountains and observe rather than intervene, for now. But know this, if the imbalance grows too severe, I will be compelled to act, regardless of our agreement. Fair enough, Naruto agreed. And in return, Nazarik will ensure the human nations don't encroach on your territory. A buffer zone of mutual respect. The negotiations concluded with surprising civility, given how violently they had begun. As Jormungandr prepared to depart for the more remote mountains, Fluter approached cautiously, his academic curiosity overcoming his fear. Grade 1, the old magic caster addressed the dragon with surprising boldness. Might I be permitted to visit your domain occasionally? My life's research concerns magical knowledge, and your wisdom would be invaluable. The dragon regarded Fluter with amusement. A human scholar brave enough to seek dragon lore directly. Interesting. You may visit once each season, old one, provided you come alone and bring offerings of knowledge in exchange. With that agreement reached, Jormungandr launched his massive body skyward, wings of controlled flame carrying him toward the distant peaks. The ground trembled one final time as he released a triumphant roar that echoed across the landscape, a declaration of his return to the living world. That went better than expected, Naruto commented as the guardians gathered around him. Though I doubt it's the last we'll hear from him. Indeed, Demiurge agreed. The dragon's EXPLA nation raises troubling questions about our effect on this world's fundamental magical structure. Questions we'll need to investigate, Naruto acknowledged. But for now, let's report our success to the Empire. Theo Berkana is no longer in immediate danger. As they prepared to return to Nazarik, Naruto noticed Albedo standing apart from the others, her expression uncharacteristically pensive. Something on your mind? He asked, joining her. The dragon spoke of foreign energy disrupting this world's balance, she replied quietly. He meant you specifically, your chakra system rather than Nazarik's magic. I find myself